When you go down to the gym, everyone talks about had your protein goals, bro, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nobody ever says,
How's
have
your
you had your fibre
goal?
intake?
Yeah, what's going on with your fibre?
It never happens.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it hasn't quite got that macho image.
No.
When it comes to the carnivore diet, I cannot argue the case that we should be carnivores. Chewing on their burgers that come from an intensively farmed animal that's fed antibiotics and fed food that it's not evolved to eat, like fish remains. This is 2014, right? Before veganism and plant-based.
Totally.
You know, he said, well, if we can do it with the plant-based, it seems the logical thing to do because we're opening up to more people. We don't want to exclude some other people.
100%,
so it was a very much pragmatic point.
Right. It's kind of like the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
And all animals get their protein from plants anyway.
Yeah.
Hi there and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome the co-founder of Huel, the former NHS dietitian, and now the author of a book called Well Fed. Hey James, how you doing and welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
First of all, I do like your tattoos.
Thank you very much. I see you've tried to...
Got these done especially for you. What do you think?
They're great, thank you.
Maybe I'll take them off then. So one thing I wanted to ask you about your tattoos, you've got an interesting saying underneath your t-shirt. Do you want to tell me what that is?
Yeah, this is Sanskrit for love, friendship, happiness. And on my upper back, I've got strength, wisdom and success.
That's awesome.
In Sanskrit. A lot of people have skulls and death and daggers. I'd rather have positive stuff.
Yeah. And my daughter's actually learning Sanskrit at the moment. So it's an ancient Indian language, actually. So it's one of the eldest, or if not the eldest. Right?
And if you follow the Germanic languages, including English, Dutch, Danish, German back, they originate from Sanskrit.
That's right, Latin.
Ancient
exactly.
Well, yeah, we're a hybrid language, but their original origin is traced back to Sanskrit, apparently. I'm a nutritionist here. Not a language guy. I'm co-founder of Huel. I've been a former dietitian, worked in the bodybuilding and fitness world, but I can't think of a better term to call what I do. So I call it nutrition communicator, which covers everything from writing, talking on podcasts, going on stage, having Q&As, webinars or whatever, and also the social media thing where you stand in your kitchen with your phone and record yourself and upload it and chase the likes. Yeah. But so I call it everything that comes into that bracket.
Have you been doing this more social media more recently as a result of you launching the book?
They're kind of all happening at the same time. I was hoping I was going to get a book contract, which I did last year. And so I was kind of building the social media ready for that. It was kind of properly doing it September 23, although I kind of semi-started April 23. So I've only been doing it that long. And obviously I've been working on the book for a few years. And I do other things as well, which I was kind of holding back purposely because he all had to get in a good place that I could do a bit less. Right. But also just to improve my communication skills. Yeah. I'm more of a natural writer. Well, I hope people will think that.
I was really impressed. I mean, it's obvious that you read a lot from your writing style, and it's really quite pleasant read, actually. And it's not too, what's the word, like draining. Do you know when you have some very more scientific books or something?
Absolutely. I read them, So my favourite science writer is Robert Sapolsky. I don't know if you know, does Behave and Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers and Determined and stuff. I haven't seen no. So he is a neuroscientist, endocrinologist, primatologist, anthropologist, all that bracket. And he's a brilliant writer. He makes the most complicated and complex science into something readable and slightly humorous. Yeah. So if I can get into a remote style of Sapolsky in my writing, that would be good. So he's my kind of writing idol, so to speak. So because sciences can be piss boring, right? Yeah. And I'm not an academic. I don't come from academia. I come from other nutrition stuff. Yes. So, but what I try and do is knit together other people's ideas, books, papers, articles, journals, etc. Knit it all into one and try and just try and think about it a bit more. I come from a human nutrition background. Yeah. And I've got a varied range of skills from the NHS, which I know you want to talk about, the fitness world, food industry. Yeah. And I'm just trying to think things broader. I just want to unravel the nutrition complexity and just get people to consider things a bit more broadly and black and white thinking. Got to get away from black and white thinking.
Yeah, totally. As you are communicating that really well now in the book, have you faced any challenges when you're trying to reach a broader audience with that communication as well?
I haven't got a huge social media following as yet. I mean, it's okay. Across the channels, about 45,000. LinkedIn, Instagram being the biggest ones, Facebook, TikTok, Substack, YouTube. So cumulatively, it's about 45,000. So it's not huge.
It's still big.
Yeah, but that's cumulative, but compared to other people, so it's quite a challenge. So getting the word out there. I've done a lot of interviews since late November with the book launch to coincide with the book launch, whether that be I've done a lot of podcasts, some in person like this, and mainstream press. I was in The Guardian, they did a piece on me. Telegraph, apparently today, is something's coming out. I mean, I went. It was the front page of The Guardian, right? That was just weird. A petrol station seeing this on the front. So it's a lot of fun, right? What's not to like, right? I get to talk to lovely people about lovely topics.
Yeah, totally.
So it's a lot of fun. It's got a lot of organising because I'm not from London,
right?
But it's cool
for sure. So take me back a little bit, and I want to know a bit more about the story, especially on your early experiences. When you were at the NHS and how that shaped your views on nutrition and also how it influenced your career path.
I'm going to rewind slightly before that, if that's okay.
Sure.
The reason I went to uni was probably two things. I put down to my mum having terminal breast cancer growing up, and she changed the way she ate in order to help her live longer. And, it was the early 80s she was diagnosed, and she survived 11 years, right? And, the NHS were brilliant, but it was still the 80s.
Yeah, right.
But so she ate a vegetarian diet, and
she moved to a vegetarian diet.
Yes, she did. Yeah.
And what was her diet before?
Just omnivorous.
Right.
But Dad and me didn't. But we still had healthy food. There was a lot of talk about nutrition.
Right.
The other side of it, I was always a very wimpy kid and was bullied as a kid. So I turned to bodybuilding when I was 16.
Yeah.
And then 2 years on, when it's time to go to uni, what do I want to study? Do I do the sensible thing, economics, or do I do nutrition? Knowledge is power. Yeah. Bigger muscles, better knowledge.
Right.
And I chose the one that followed my heart, which probably fast forward probably was the rational thing to do.
Yeah. Do you think you started to study nutrition? And you're sorry to hear about your mum, but she passed away from breast cancer, was it?
Yeah, 11 years later.
11 years.
So I was 19
You were
when she
19
passed.
years old. Did that spur you on to say, I want to look at nutrition? And did you think that nutrition had something to do with how your mum got the cancer in the first place?
Not say how she got it, but I'm super confident that her changing her lifestyle made her live longer.
Okay. And what do you think drove her to get it in terms of the environment of getting breast cancer?
I mean, I can't talk for that. She had a difficult childhood. We don't know. We don't know. So I can't. We couldn't comment on that.
Right.
But improving her lifestyle, very positive mindset as well helped. So then I did my degree and the nutrition and dietetics degree. You go into the NHS. I always kind of knew it wasn't a long-term thing for me. Right. But I thought, this is what you do, I'll do it. And I'm glad I did, because you get invaluable experience dealing with different people. Right. Don't get me wrong, you're more treatment. I was treatment as a dietitian. Right. There was some preventative, as in outpatient clinics for weight loss and hyperlipidemia and food allergies and stuff. But most of what I did was inpatient. So I did PEG tubes and nasogastric tubes, feeding people who couldn't swallow or needed extra food.
Yeah.
So that was what I looked at. So it was nutritional requirements for the critically ill. Right. That was the major part I did. So for 7 years, all in all, I was in the NHS, and then I moved on into the fitness world. But yes, to answer your question, bring it back. Yeah. Yes, it was an invaluable experience. Right. I didn't know how invaluable it was going to be until I'm in this later world. And I've got quite a mixed background in nutrition, which is great.
Yeah, it's varied to have that understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why did you follow also the bodybuilding side? And, you still practice bodybuilding today?
I still go to the gym.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I caught the bug at 16. I was a wimpy kid.
Yeah.
Probably as a young kid, I always wanted to be a superhero. Yeah. I was bullied. I was very skinny. I mean, a lot of kids are bullied. It affected me a lot. And one of my best friends, a couple of years older than me, still one of my best friends today, he started going to the gym. He started getting a bit bigger, and he encouraged me. And I went to the gym on my own and just caught the bug. And the only time I had any time off was in 2016 when I was quite seriously ill for a few months. And that was other than that, I think I had 2 weeks off over my finals. Yeah. Otherwise, I've not had any time off.
It's super important, isn't it, to do, especially things like load-bearing exercises as you get older as well. Especially to look at things like falls. As you get older, you want stability. Yeah. And it definitely helps for longevity.
Yeah, it does. And I can't remember what the official guidelines are. So a certain amount of cardio a week and and a couple of sessions of weight resistance training.
Yeah.
And it is great. Like, I've been lifting heavy things since I was 16, so it's part of me. It's the cardio bit that's not part of me.
Okay.
But I have, for the last few years, definitely been working on that.
Yeah.
Not quite as big as I used to be. I've lost about a stone of muscle, I guess.
Right. And what sort of cardio do you do?
I do short runs. Because I like round the block, literally. Because I don't enjoy running.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to dislike it less, so I guess that's a win. I do circuits because they're varied. So slam balls, battle ropes, kettlebell swings, stuff like that. Because it's varied. You put the clock on, you do a minute of this, rest, minute of something else. Variety. That
bodybuilding side and the fitness side and your nutrition side helps you with your career path then afterwards, right? Having all that background.
They all play into each other, I think.
Yeah. We already talked about nutrition being quite complex. Have you faced any challenges yourself when you're trying to explain it?
Yes, it's because humans have a sort of natural tendency, I feel, to put things into little boxes and to try and think in very much black and white. And this I've sort of experienced, and more lately when I had Huel and we started looking at sustainable food, because I'm a human nutrition background. The food sustainability is new to me, and I was learning this stuff on the fly. But the more and more I looked at it, the more I thought these have to work together. So my department at Huel is called Sustainable Nutrition, and I think this is really important. We're in the third decade of the third millennium, and we have to think of those two words together. People think about nutrition, but we have to think about sustainable nutrition. My mind's gone that way, and this is partly what led me to write the book.
How would you define what that means?
Okay, we have got a definition. I can't remember it ad verbatim. We defined it in 2020, me and my colleagues.
And this was at Huel?
At Huel. And I've put the definition in the book. In one of the later chapters. It refers to like making choices that are going to protect the environment and biodiversity both now and for future generations. But let's talk about the word sustainable, if we've got a moment.
Go for it.
We often think of the word sustainable when it comes to the environment. Right? What's sustainable now, what's going to be sustainable in the future. And that's important, primarily. But there's two other ways that I think get missed. Okay, let me explain. In the last chapter, I do talk about this quite a bit, but it's all very well wanting to address the environment, but you've got to make sure that you're looking after your own health first. Because if you're not in good health, for perhaps not eating an optimal diet, how can you look after others? So there's a phrase that I use in there that I've come up with, that a diet isn't sustainable if it can't sustain an individual. And I think that's really important. So that's the key point. The other thing is pull back to business. Like I'm in Huel. We run a sustainable business. We're a B Corp. We score high on a lot of ESG metrics. We've got a low carbon product and all this good stuff that we can be singing about. But the business has got to be sustainable as well. Business have to be profitable. They have to have products that people want to buy. We could have objectively a highly nutritious product with a low carbon footprint and all this great stuff. Nobody could afford it, or it tasted rubbish, or nobody heard about it because the marketing team weren't doing a very good job. We would have failed at our objective of doing good in the world. And by definition, the business wouldn't be sustainable. So this is what people often don't get. Referring to your question about nutrition, about messages, it's all about sustainability as well. All businesses have to be sustainable in order to do good. So sometimes there will be trade-offs. One of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Sowell. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. And I think people just got to get that in every facet of life. It's key.
And when it comes to sustainability and the choices that we make, I mean, if you're living in the Western world, you're lucky you might have 3 meals a day. That's times by 7, that's 21. So in a week, 21 meal choices. How do we make those meal choices more sustainable? In the book, that modern diets are failing us. Can you explain a bit more about that connection?
Okay, there's two things to answer there. So let me just touch on that latter point first. Why are modern diets failing us? Well, firstly, that's the publisher came up with that subtitle, okay?
Okay. Because I think you changed it, right? It was something else before,
a
few times.
Yeah, it was changed on day before printing. And it wasn't going to be called Well-Fed, it was going to be called Thought for Food, or at one point anyway.
Do you not like it?
I know, I like it. I do love it, but modern diets are failing us. So how modern diets are failing us, we've got an increased risk of non-communicable disease. Right? It's brilliant that pathogenic disease is minimal. I'm saying this at the back end of COVID, right? But broadly speaking,
heart disease, type 2 diabetes,
Alzheimer's, arthritis, inflammatory diseases, etc. They are massively on the rise. Okay. Then we've got food-related carbon emissions, food waste, land use, water use, all going in the wrong direction. We've got mental health crisis, and that is partly linked to food. There's a whole chapter on it there. We've also got questionable ethical practices in the farming system, both in effect of human rights and animal rights. Now, I do realise that the word ethics is subjective. What you and I might think as unethical, I might have a different opinion on.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, we're probably roughly on the same page. Okay.
Yeah.
I've defined what I deem as ethical in the book. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably too long to talk about that here.
Yeah.
So that's how they're failing us. Okay. But I do start the book. You know, there was that government report last year that said our broken food system. I just profoundly disagree with that statement. It's the wrong mindset. If you were to pick up someone from the Middle Ages and teleport them today, if you were to pick up a hunter-gatherer from 12,000 years ago and teleport them today, they are not going to think our food system's broken.
No.
They're going to be running around in glee, right? They're loving the food system, okay?
Yeah.
However, it's not what it was intended to be, and it's going in a wrong direction, okay? So it's not broken, but it's not good. And so what can we do to fix it? And so coming back to your other point about what's sustainable, okay? Let me say one of the other reasons I started writing the book was in 2019, after looking at the science of climate change and all the other stuff, I decided to change my own way of eating, which, you know, from focusing all on health and performance, of course, I thought, well, that's really important, but shouldn't we also be considering carbon impact? We know that animal produce, meat-rich diets have got the biggest carbon footprint.
Yeah. And what would you say? There's lots of numbers that go around.
Yeah.
Have you settled on a number that you
so this
believe
is what,
would be contributing to the greenhouse gases?
So
animal ag.
Animal, and I can't remember the figures. There's some in there, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Sure.
But we know that 28 to 30% of the calories in a typical Western diet comes from animals.
Right.
So that's fish, meat, milk, eggs, in total.
Right.
In 2019, I thought I'd cut that down by 2/3 to about 10%. Okay. Yes, it was a finger in the air figure. But then as I looked at the data, it seems quite rational because it's doable. Okay. But what does that look like for people? It's all very well me saying, you know, 10%, cut it by 2/3. But it means having 2 or maybe 3 days a week with almost zero animal-derived ingredients. Yeah. And where you do have meals with meat in it, maybe have a bit smaller portion. So the whole chicken chickpeas analogy, I mean, that's just a metaphor, of course, but you know, having a pulse with a meat, and just deprioritizing meat, you know, and there are other benefits as well. We know that we're in a fiber crisis. We know that in 2021 data here, of course, but only 9% of UK adults were hitting the recommended daily amount of fiber a day. Yeah. Then you get all those people saying, "Oh, fiber's not essential." Define the word essential. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is it essential? Can you live, as in survive, without it? Yeah. Can you thrive without it? Absolutely not.
You need fiber for protein absorption.
It helps absorption of all nutrients. Okay. Right. Keeping things moving through, but also it's been linked to cardiovascular health for decades. Right. 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 And then more importantly, we've got the gut microbiome. We now know it has a direct link to positive mental well-being and cognition. So not just feeling good, but able to focus and not be distracted as well. Yeah. So there's lots of really, really cool stuff about having fiber. Yeah. And so the problem is with meat-rich diets is not so much, taking carbon emissions out of it. Yeah. It's not so much the meat that's causing a problem, because I don't think it is, but people are having meat instead of other things. So they're missing out on key plant nutrients. Right. And it's because of the carbon emissions. Yeah, and we know we don't need to have anywhere near as much meat as we do. We know we don't. I come from the gym scene where everyone's talking about protein. I'll tell you something that never happens. All right. Yeah. When you go down to the gym, everyone talks about have your protein goals, bro, and stuff like that. Yeah. Nobody ever says have your fiber intake. Yeah. What's going on with your fiber? It never happens. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it hasn't quite got that macho image.
No. Maybe we need to do something about that. I'm communication-wise.
That's what I'm trying to do.
If you're up for that, we'll try and figure something out.
Well, I probably look like I go to the gym, and I certainly don't look like a typical fiber fiber lover, but I'm trying to push that message.
Yeah, totally. It's super important. Yeah. And just going back to when you mentioned hunter-gatherers, I think, when you look at the Stone Ages and even maybe before the Stone Age, they did do some scientific research where they saw that our very old ancestors actually were consuming way more plants than meat. And if you think about it, if we didn't have tools, maybe we might have stones to crush the hulls of different types of wheats or whatever, And they did find that in the enzymes in these remains that they found. So I think we were, and then so when you think about, oh, somebody says, oh, let's eat like our ancestors do, people immediately think eat like a carnivore, right? But in my eyes, we were never hunter-gatherers, we were always gatherers, and then the hunting came a lot later.
This is a really good point. So firstly, you've got all these carnivore advocates going on social media with their shirts off, talking about eating meat, looking all tough and manly, right? And there's some female influencers as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a load of bollocks, really, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, right. Okay, so why can't all food be manly? And I don't want to use a term there. I'm just trying to combat what the sort of persona that these people are giving off. Okay,
right.
Now, you're quite right. And where do we get the evidence from? So we get the evidence from looking at DNA that they found in fossils is probably the wrong word, but what they found, we know that there's cave paintings. Okay, they generally show a lot more hunting because more people more like to draw about hunting. It's more of a win. But we also know modern hunter-gatherer tribes. Okay, and we've also got evidence in the caves, and we've got evidence of what we now call milling. From 30,000 years ago. I think it's some French caves. So it was probably rubbing grains between two. So, and the grains were sporadic. They weren't growing in crops. So, this was pre-agriculture, which is broadly, depending on where you look, 10 to 12,000 years ago. So people weren't growing it in the sense that we think of it, but we were eating grains. Okay? So we can eat a varied range of foods. I know you want to talk about my Adaptivore concept at some point.
Let's talk about that.
And there is good evidence. We've been meat eaters and we've been plant eaters in the past. We are adapted to be able to consume a wide range of foods. Okay. Now, I'm not wholly convinced by the vegan argument, and I don't know if you've got to the final chapter yet, but I have a real wrestle with myself, and I tie myself in a right old knot. Okay, with should humans be vegans? I argue the point from a biological perspective, an anthropological perspective, and even a philosophical perspective. And everybody's going to be disappointed with my answer because I don't find one.
Right. Okay.
Now, it's a couple of things to point out here. I can argue the case that we shouldn't be vegans, but I can also argue the case that we should be vegans. When it comes to the carnivore diet, I cannot argue the case that we should be carnivores.
What would you say are the top three things
why we shouldn't be carnivores? So because we're missing out on fiber.
Number one,
there'll be way too much animal produce. We know that diets that are super high in animals are linked to increased risk of cardiovascular diseases. And we're also missing out on some of the plant phytonutrients as well. They're not necessarily the top three things, but they are three things. Okay. Of course, you could, in short term, there's people that follow the carnivore diet and they're feeling great. I can't argue with that. Subjectively. I'm talking on a broader scale here. And some people, maybe they've been having crap food. We do know that there are certain types of people that maybe have some inflammatory autoimmune disorders. They're doing very well on the carnivore diet. And it's not for me to dispute that. They know better than me. But I do think they're a minority.
Do you think human brain evolution has helped with us eating more plants? I have seen some evidence based on that, where the types of nutrients that we're getting, the diversity of plants, and the things that we were as humans trying to eat has developed our evolution, basically made us see things differently.
Well, we now know that fiber-rich, plant-rich diets have been associated with better mental health and cognition. I don't know if that's helped us evolutionarily, but we do know that the ability to manipulate fire to cook food, both meat and some plants, especially like tubers, to be able to cook them right through, have been a valuable energy source. You can have shorter guts and more can go to the brain. But I don't know if it's just down to plants. I've not come across any direct research on that. But it probably is, because we should talk about my Adaptivore idea.
Let's talk about that.
Because it keeps bubbling its way in here.
Exactly,
So I've come up with a definition. I don't know if I've come up with the word, but I've certainly come up with a definition. Adaptivore in chapter 9. And what is it briefly? So I'm making the case that humans are adaptivores, which means we have the ability to get nutrition from a wide range of foods, from animal matter, plant matter, fungi, and even microorganisms. Now, you could look at and say, well, what's the difference between that and an omnivore? Well, an omnivore is generally seen as just plant and animal matter. A pig is a great example of an omnivore, because they will eat anything. And as far as I know, and I haven't looked at too many other species yet, pigs are probably also an adaptivore, but from a different perspective. There's another another spin on the human one. So broadly, the definition is we have adapted to acquire nutrition from a wide range of foods, and that adaptation comes at the level of the gene, the level of the species, the level of the individual, and the level of the social group as well, and possibly even the level of the microbiome as well. So at the level of the gene means we've evolved, and that means as a species we're able to do that. But those genes, the gene expression can change through epigenetics, which I don't really go into any great detail in there.
Right.
At the level of the individual, let's talk about that one before we talk about the social group.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say, and I take two extremes here. There's a child that's born in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the food's there, a lot of spices. And there's a good reason for that, because it was helped to preserve foods and helped to combat foodborne illnesses in the gut.
Yes.
Which were both valuable for evolution.
Yeah.
Well, that child was adapted to be able to tolerate those spices, and probably even has a flavour preference for them. Let's take the other extreme, say someone born in North Norway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who are very cold, where food preservation was very easy through freezing.
Yes.
And you would pick an adult Norwegian and put them in Sri Lanka where they'd never had spicy food before, they wouldn't tolerate it.
No.
Now, to some degree, they could tolerate it over the course of time.
Yeah.
But probably not as much as the kid.
Yeah.
So that's an example of an adaptation at the level of the individual. You can adapt. You've probably tried some foods and you haven't really liked them, and you've come to actually quite like them. You might be associate with them, an association. Let's say you were into sports, and it was a very energy dense food, and you hadn't really liked it, but one day you were knackered from hard training, and you had a meal with that in because it was the only thing available. People have actually come to like that food because they remembered when they needed it. That's an adaptation at the level of individual. What about a social group? So these are more culture. Let's look at the word culture. Its etymology. It comes from the tilling of the land, the acquisition of food from the land. Think a similarity to the word cultivate.
Right, exactly.
Now, we use the word culture these days to mean so much: the way we speak, the way we dress, the way we behave, maybe the way we dance, and more recently still, companies have a culture, or institutions have a certain culture within them. But the word absolutely comes from food. Agriculture means food from a field. Agri means field.
You speak about cell-based meat, which is now called cultivated meat.
Yes, cultured meat. Or
cultivated, I think, is what most people term it as now.
Yeah, and this is important. So that's these are microorganism derived foods. So we can consume these foods. So I'm basically saying, more on the culture thing first. Actually, we've adapted through certain cultural processes. So I talk about nixtamalization. So if you were to go to Central and South America, you've got tortillas and hominy, the maize-based breads.
Okay,
There's a reason they're there. Okay. When maize, especially the type of maize that was grown out there, it was very hard and rigid. Okay. And pellagra, which is the deficiency Ds of B3, niacin, was very prevalent.
Right.
So, but through wisdom, cultural wisdom, they by using lime water, and don't mean lime the fruit, I mean lime the mineral. It breaks down the tough shells, frees up the vitamin B3 and prevented pellagra. Now this was just cultural wisdom. And now these breads have become more traditional and whatever. Where in other parts of the world we didn't need to. Now, of course, we've got bread fortification. But that was an example of a cultural adaptation to the way we have food. Salt is another one. We know that salt's probably about 5,000 years at most. It's more for temperate zones. In the hot places you can dry it. In the cold places you can freeze it. So it was more temperate. But we've adapted across the world to be able to have, like salt, it's used as a culinary agent now to help improve things. And some people have more of a predisposition to liking salt than others. Part of that is adapted at the level of the individual, some bit of the species. There are other things. Let's talk about lactase persistence, which is the ability for adults to consume cow's or goat's milk or even other milks. Well, it's only in about 1/3 of the global population. Being a white Brit, I probably thought it was everyone growing up because that's the way we were taught to think. But a lot of African origin and some Asian origin, especially like Chinese, for instance, can't tolerate it. They don't have the enzyme for it that meant that when they're adults they can digest other species' milk. That was an adaptation at the level of the gene. Here's something interesting. They found in some Eastern European populations who can perfectly tolerate milk as adults, they don't have that gene. Now this adaptation, it appears, has happened at the level of the microbiome. So the microbiome, I'm sure if they guzzled pints of it, they would They'd probably feel a bit, bit guts,
right.
but they don't have the gene, but the microbes are breaking this down. So that adaptation's happened at the level of the microbiome, but it's just demonstrating how humans are adaptivores. There's also like starch. We spoke briefly about milling and grains. Well, the AME1 gene, it's in a vast number, not everybody, but a vast number of people across the world. And we've got amylase, which is the enzyme that breaks down starch to maltose, breaks down the polysaccharide starch into the disaccharide maltose. And it happens twice in the body. It's in the mouth in saliva, and it's in the pancreas. Well, the AME1 gene, the more of that gene that's working, the more salivary amylase will work. So they're breaking down starch more efficiently. Now, what an advantage that was when times were hard. I mean, you've got to forget, times were pretty hard just a few decades ago.
Totally.
So these are all adaptations that have happened. So it's my idea that we are adaptivores. Okay, so now you could be asking, you look around, we've got all these, not here in your house, but we've got junk foods everywhere. We've got high sugar, high fat, low fiber foods. We're just a short walk away from the shop if they're not in the house. Isn't the fact that we're an adaptivore working against us now, because we are now in this food environment, highly palatable food is all around us. Isn't it working against us? Possibly, but it might not be. Because we've got all these new food technologies around. We've just spoke about the cultured meat.
We
spoke about, there's some other technologies as well. Some of the other ways of growing proteins, maybe in bioreactors or fats as well.
They're pulling out CO2.
Yes, I speak to the guys in Finland at Solar Foods, and I love what they do. Spoke to them a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Nice.
I love all this. So if we're adaptivores, we know we can get food from these sources. Well, isn't the fact that we're adapting, isn't that happening at the level of the lab or the factory? That's still an adaptation. So I think it's quite optimistic to reveal that we are adaptivores.
In a way, that's kind of extension of our microbiome in a lab.
Yes.
Because they're testing it all there, and then, will that work? And
Of course, it's going to get pushed back from people that say it's not natural, as they're chewing on their burgers that come from an intensively farmed animal that's fed antibiotics and fed food that it's not evolved to eat, like fish remains.
Actually, I did want to talk to you about that, because that kind of upset me a little bit. I'm telling you why, because you mentioned that it was fish remains being given to cattle, and I was born a vegetarian, right, all my life, and then turned vegan about 6 years ago. If I think back when I was consuming milk, but the milk and the cow would have been fed fish remains, I felt a bit, that's not right. That's even worse.
I know how old you are, the same as me, right? It doesn't happen in all farms, for sure.
I understand that. I could have had exposure to it, right? Potentially.
You could have,
Right. That animal was not naturally meant to be, Daisy the cow wasn't going fishing. She would be happily grazing on grass, right? But now we're giving them soya, we're giving them all these corn proteins. That's unnatural to help them get bigger, build more muscle, produce more milk. Let's talk about Huel. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was, in terms of the vision behind Huel, how does it align with the ideas that you've presented in your book? That's one question.
So Huel wasn't my idea. Julian Hearn, who's the principal founder, he contacted me in June 2014, had this great idea. It did turn out to be a great idea. And he wanted a nutritionist to work with him. We worked together for a year. I came up with the original formula. And June 2015, we launched. He said, "Do you want to be my co-founder?" I said, "Yes, please." And it, one of the best decisions of my life, of course. Now, what does this Huel align with my book? Well, let's be honest here. Huel came before the ideas in my book. It's through working with Huel that, I've always been a science nerd. But I'm a human nutrition nerd, first and foremost. When I started looking at sustainable food and the problems of the food system, that opened my eyes to looking more broader, which made me look at the ethic of the food system, some of the farming methods, which sort of opened my eyes to other things. And then the more I started looking at other things, started going down rabbit warren, I wasn't getting anywhere. It's just sprawling out. Look at the complexity. So I thought, okay, but this is really confusing for people. How can we simplify it? So I changed my diet in 2019, like I mentioned. In COVID, I got bored, wrote a few essays. I wanted to call this strategy something. I called it contemplative nutrition. That name has held on, and it's used in the book. I thought, there's a book here. So I started writing the book in the early part of 21, thought I'd finished it in summer 22, had a nightmare trying to get a publisher, sort of shelved it, excuse the book-related pun there, for a while.
Yeah.
Played around with the odd chapter here and there, put some on my Substack where I write some of my articles.
Right.
And then managed to get a publisher in late April, early May 24, which was HarperCollins. And then it was brilliant, but my editor there, who's absolutely brilliant, wanted me to rewrite 3 chapters.
Oh, wow.
So bang went summer.
Right, yeah.
It's not that what I wrote was bad, it just was off topic. So she's right, but I did have a little bit of bit of a heart attack when she told me.
So really it was the other way around where,
So
a lot of what you brought up with your knowledge from Huel help you define what you put in the book and all the journey that you've had. And in terms of the actual product when you first started, why did you decide to make it like 100% vegan, and whose idea was that between you and Julian?
When he commissioned me because I was just a paid consultant initially, he commissioned me to come up with something. I gave him 2 formulas.
Right.
I gave him one with whey protein.
Interesting.
And I said, I'm from the gym scene. I know whey, but I did another at the same time. I didn't simultaneously. I said, well, we don't have to. We can combine these, the brown rice protein and the pea protein, in order to get the full amino acid profile. And so we kind of, I don't know whether he asked me to do that or I just did it. I don't know. I can't remember. But when we spoke about it afterwards, I now know Julian. He's a very logical thinker, and he said, his thought process was, and this is 2014, right? Before veganism and plant-based, it doesn't very early, ago, but he said, well, if we can do it with the plant-based, it seems the logical thing to do because we're opening up to more people. We don't want to exclude some other people.
100%,
so it was a very much pragmatic point,
right? Yeah,
and then
it's kind of like the lowest common denominator, and all animals get their protein from plants anyway, right?
Yeah, and we know we could have a complete protein by doing it with a combination of proteins, and so why would we want to? That was, and I said, well, I agree.
Well,
that was a very quick discussion.
That was a fantastic decision.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it definitely was.
Yeah.
And then we looked at the environmental credentials. Thought, well, if we're plant-based, we're actually low carbon. Then we thought we're actually better rather than just shouting about it. We need to quantify this.
Yeah.
And we did.
I guess you don't have to shout about it as much these days.
And we didn't shout about it too much.
And you didn't then?
No, because...
I don't think so.
No, we didn't. We've always kept it as a kind of a nice to have.
Yeah.
It's like an add-on because most people, we've done some customer research, most people don't buy it for environmental credentials, even for vegans or for people that are predominantly plant-based diets.
Yeah.
They buy Huel because it's nutritionally complete and they like it and it's convenient and hopefully affordable.
Yeah.
If people are vegan because of environmental reasons, then they're probably, it ticks that box for them. But it's not, that wouldn't be the primary reason they go for Huel.
So I picked up one of your newer ones, the black edition yesterday. So this has got higher levels of protein, right? Same amount of vitamins and
35
minerals.
grams of protein per bowl.
Extra protein level.
Well, the 35 total protein per bowl.
35 compared to, was it 20?
It's 20 to 22, depending on the flavour.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. Now, what's your opinion on the competitors in the space? And how does your product at Huel differ from what they have?
Depends what we mean by competitor, right?
Well, who would you define as Huel's competitors?
Well, you could argue that our competitor is any other meal that anyone's having, because if they're having another meal, they're not having. But if you're talking about sort of the category, we don't like to use the term meal replacement. People refer to us as that. The all-encompassing category is complete foods.
Right, okay.
So it would cover the bars, which wouldn't be a meal, they'd be a snack. Right. The bars, the powders, the hot and savoury pot range we have. There are some other brands out there. There's some reasonably good products. Yeah, I'm biased, whatever I say. Yeah, sure. But I do, and there's a lot of copycats now, and they're not copycats. They do a very poor job of copying us. Yeah, because I'd like to think we've got the attention to detail, right? Yeah, sure. I know what goes in there, right? Yeah, I've got it. I don't come up with nutrition all the products now because I've got brilliant people in the team. But I've seen every recipe and every formula, and by the formula I know the nutrition that goes into it. Yeah. We lab test to a high degree. And obviously we do all the health and safety stuff, of course, and do that to a high degree as well, but nutritional lab tests. Right. We know what's going into our products, and we know how every nutrient behaves over shelf life. This is through years of doing that. Right, okay. But I was very anal about doing that early on, because I wanted to understand. I probably was a bit over the top, but it's a good thing, right? Now, We don't test every product run and every flavour, of course.
Sure.
But we have some on shelf life, and we test it at maybe mid and certainly end of shelf life.
Yeah.
Every now and again.
Does it make an impact, and how much impact does it make?
Because we know, and there's been a couple of nutrients before that have fallen off, so we fixed it.
Okay, right.
And so you're asking me about competitors.
Yes.
I'd be very surprised, very surprised if any other competitors are going to the lengths we do. I'm sure they do some testing.
Okay,
of course
right.
they do.
Yeah.
Right? They'd have to.
They might not necessarily do it on the shelf life and testing it at various stages.
And different flavours. And what about different nutrients, okay, different ingredients? And it's all right just having pea protein on that, but what do they really know their supply chain? This is something else, right? Our procurement department do an outstanding job of understanding the supply chain.
Yeah.
You know, are what we get in, you know, we take the ESG credentials very seriously.
Yeah.
Let's look at human rights.
Yeah, sure.
Let's look at all down the supply chain.
Yeah.
But also, is as the companies we're buying from, are they sustainable? Are they stable?
Right.
Because if they're going to go bust,
and you're B Corp, aren't you, as well?
We are B Corp.
Yeah. So that would have been part of that process.
We were doing that before B Corp.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. That's awesome. You're obviously trying to get the whole profile right, and there has to be a long list.
Yes. Yes.
And you know, some people would say, you know, we want to go for clean label, limited. You know, that's all the natural.
Yeah.
But when you're on the go and you want something, you want to grab something, this is a good solution to have. Right?
And what does clean label even mean? I mean, there is some sort of weird definition by these people. But look, okay, it was all very nice going back to, you know, eating whatever real food, whatever people mean by that. But we're done. Yeah. There's 8 billion people on the planet now. We've got smartphones, we've got internet, we've got fast moving. You know, if you want to go and have your small holding and farm and have a go and do it all yourself, brilliant. You know, and that's great. Huel's not for you.
Yeah.
But Huel, but how many people are genuinely doing that? And if also, equally, if you can afford to go and buy your ingredients from certain places and pay the extra money, animals as well, that are ethically farmed, and also you've got the time to do that, and you've got the time to prepare 3 meals a day. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm not. I cannot argue with you. I have zero argument with these people. Now back to the real world.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's live in the modern real world. People aren't doing that. But you know, the whole 5th pillar of contemplative nutrition is about eating together.
Yeah.
Isn't that anti-Huel?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, in one respect, wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a world where people were preparing every meal together? But then we wouldn't have smartphones and be sitting here on a podcast now because nobody would have invented this technology because we'd all be doing that.
Yeah.
But can we be doing more? I really want to encourage people, the community aspect of food.
100%.
So, you know, I'm very kindly invited for a meal with you guys afterwards. It's brilliant. Yeah. I'm going to be eating with new people and enjoying food. It's the most fundamental act of kindness is preparing food for someone. Yeah. There is no kinder act.
Yeah.
And we have to embrace that.
Yeah. And it's also you're sharing the experience whilst you're eating.
Yes.
And you're talking about stuff that you suddenly you might eat something and it might spark your imagination about something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and like with your family, you've had a bit of a crap day.
Exactly.
You want to vent off. You don't vent off in anger, but just you're offloading and not
exactly. It's super
and
important.
sharing your good experiences as well.
Yeah.
You got your daughters. What's happened today, and for them, you want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And also, we can get a bit more practical as well. We know when you're preparing food for others, you're more likely to prepare healthier food choices. Yeah. And that's done. Yeah. And there's science here, and I've covered this in the book. There is science that's shown that certain hormones and neurotransmitters associated with positive feelings are released. I'll talk about behavioural synchrony here.
Right.
Let me go a bit sciencey now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's a science bit.
Here's a science bit, right? There was research done that showed that elite rowers, when they're in the gym together with their teammates, they train harder than when separate members of the team are there just training with other people around them in the gym.
Right.
Okay? They're not all 1, 2, 3, go, not doing a circle. They're just training harder with their teammates.
Yeah.
Okay? They call that behavioural synchrony. Now, that has also been shown around the dinner table when people are eating with other people. This synchrony is happening. Now, it's not like knife and fork held together on your marks, get set, go, chew in unison.
Right.
But the fact that you're eating more or less finishing a course at the same sort of time.
I got it, right.
And the synchrony, there are benefits of that as well. So this is really, really important to embrace the fact that we should be enjoying food with other people. So I absolutely don't want people to have Huel 100% of the time.
Yeah. Awesome. With the rise of, I guess, online influencers, how can consumers separate the reliable science from misinformation?
Okay, so this is the chapter 3 of my book is contemplating misinformation.
Yeah.
Okay, a big issue. If we want to make better food choices, how can we turn off all the noise of everybody talking about different things? It's confusing, right? You've got influencers going out there villainising certain foods. So let me just give you a few. There's 10 quick key takeaways in there. I won't go through them all. Let me give 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Okay, and an underlying one. Okay.
Sure.
Anybody who talks in absolutes, right? Eat this, don't eat that. They're probably talking rubbish.
Okay. Right.
Or another one is demonising foods related to that, like saying you mustn't eat this, mustn't eat that certain food. It's villainising. Also, they try and use anyone who uses complicated sounded terms like inflammation or insulin without saying what they mean, without at least basically outlining what they mean. They're just showing off. In fact, they're not showing off because they don't really know. Okay? Another one is being transparent about any biases they may have. Now, listen, I have an obvious one here, co-founder of Huel. I'm doing the social media thing. I have a bias. I can't call it out in every video, but I rarely talk about Huel in any of my content. Occasionally I do. But it's there in my profile as can be. And whenever I do talk about it, either in the notes or I'll say it, I've got a bias. I'll make it very clear. I'll try to be clear about that. But biases aren't just about financial. The whole messiah complex comes in here. Is that individual being egged on by an audience that constantly adorns them with praise? There's a watch out. So who is likely good? The more nuanced and non-committal someone is, they're very likely giving you good information. They'll say, broadly speaking, research has shown, use the vague phrases like that. When I hear that, it's music to my ears. I think this is someone that knows what they're talking about, they're non-committal. So the phrase I like to say is, who you should listen to is someone who is confidently unconfident in what they're saying. So that's the sort of the rules of thumb. That it doesn't always work, and there are a few more in there, but it's a good sign. And it's not black and white like that either. You know, there are people, I'm sure I've messed up in a few of my content. In fact, I know I have because I've been called out on it. Then I have to do another video to debunk, which is a good sign, by the way.
But that's good. That's also reflective on your own.
It's high-rung thinking.
Trait, and it's like, okay, I might have said that wrong or whatever, and let's go back and we'll correct it. There's some new evidence that's come out.
And that's science, right? Science is fluid.
Yeah.
So I've already had an email from an academic friend of mine who's a genuine expert in one part of the book that I'm not an expert in.
Okay, right.
Picking me up on it. And she probably must have taken her an hour to pull this email together.
Yeah.
Right? Did I feel a little bit uncomfortable when I got the email? Yes. Did I feel brilliant when I got the email? Yes. Because that's academic critique. That's a different type of criticism. That's saying, James, I love this here. I'm not sure I agree on that because I'm broad in my nutrition knowledge. I'm trying to piece a lot of bits together and pull them together. Right. There are genuine experts in narrow fields, and she is a genuine expert in that narrow field. So I haven't gone through it in detail yet, but she's probably right about some things. I'm probably wrong, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean the whole everything I'm saying is wrong. This is academic debate. This is how things move forward. Okay, it's when people go on straw man on social media, just from the base of a clip, and just say, no, that's not right, or worse, call me a few names.
Some of it is driving views for them personally, right?
And they're led with emotion. They're coming from emotional, and unknowledgeable. The seed oil thing is, we haven't got time to talk too much about that.
Right.
But there are people, for instance, Professor Sarah Berry, friend of mine, was on Stephen Bartlett a couple of weeks ago, right? She's a genuine expert in seed oils. Right. She really knows her stuff. She's been called all the names under the sun, because she's actually pointing out evidence. This seed oil thing has come from nowhere. It's blindsided me. And it literally is a meme that's carried on. But I've literally had people in the comments of her episode saying the science of seed oils are dangerous is clear. Well, it's actually not. It really isn't. And I bet they might have looked at a couple of papers that the slightly smarter.
What's the essence of what she was saying, though?
So
what was her position?
Her position is seed oils. There was literally no evidence that they cause any harm. And there was actually evidence that instead of other types of fats, there could be benefits. Even me saying that, I have to be quite nuanced. Of course, there are a lot of seed oils in highly dense caloric foods, and they're a very easy way of getting calories in. They're very easy to master the flavour of. So are seed oils completely guilt-free in non-communities? Probably not. But is there any direct problem with consuming seed oils? Absolutely not. There's nothing in the seed oils themselves. There's nothing there. And there is meta-analyses after meta-analyses. There's randomized control trials. The evidence is clear. But what people will do, who are trying to back up their argument, the more cleverer ultra-crepidarians, that think they'll pull a paper saying, well, what does this paper show? And they'll show some mechanistic data that will demonstrate that, to back up their argument, they've cherry-picked it. Now, the mechanistic data is interesting, and it's really, really useful, but we have to take it with a degree of salt. Pinch of salt.
Pinch of salt.
Pinch of salt. Let me explain. We've got one ingredient, one food, whatever, and we want to look at one metric, one outcome. Now, the outcome ultimately is, let's say, heart disease.
Yeah.
You can't do that because diets are so complex.
Yeah.
You can't put one thing down to another thing. So we use proxies. We use blood markers, like inflammatory markers. So one of the claims is seed oils cause inflammation. And they will show one mechanistic process where, say, one of the fatty acids that's created from seed oil consumption or from seed oils themselves, say linoleic acid, they will show a pathway that causes an increase in inflammatory marker, okay? And that's the evidence. Should you take that evidence seriously? Yeah, but you should take it seriously in relation to all the other evidence. There are numerous other mechanistic pathways that show that linoleic acid is anti-inflammatory. So there are other studies like randomized control trials, very good design ones, that say maybe a consumption with a vegetable oil, maybe linoleic acid itself. What's the totality of those? There's no information.
Yeah, it's also interesting to follow who funded that research, right, in the first place, and what ulterior motives they have.
The research does come from a lot of the oil companies. We shouldn't dismiss that, because if nobody's going to fund this, government funding is one thing, but at the moment there's a very anti-establishment. Even governments are being vilified, right? But also governments don't do a lot of research, don't fund a lot. They might give a grant for some things. So we don't have industry funding research, doesn't get done. And if people really understand just because something's funded, we funded research. Is it biased? Well, it's biased in the sense of if we hadn't probably got the result we wanted, we probably wouldn't have published it. That is a bias.
That is a bias.
I have to be. But the paper itself, the research itself, that's not biased. It wouldn't pass peer review.
No.
I don't know the peers who are reviewing papers that I'm associated with.
Yeah, right.
I know the people who have written the paper, the academics we've commissioned to do it, and they've got reputations.
Yeah.
Academia, the peer review process doesn't work like that. Do things slip through where there's nepotism and other biases, and their friends lab down the street and they're going for a drink? Of course it does. But it's in its entirety. Institutions like academia, they have certain cross-checks, checks and balances that stop all this sort of stuff.
That's right? Yeah.
So industry funded, is it something you should notice and be transparent about? Absolutely. Is it something that should turn you away from the paper? No. Yeah. You just got to be aware of it.
So let's talk about Stephen Bartlett.
Okay.
He was on their advisory board.
I was on the main board,
non-exec board of Huel.
And an investor.
And an investor too, and still is an investor.
He's still an investor,
Right.
He resigned from the board a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because he's too busy, isn't he? Let's be honest.
And he's moved from London to LA.
Yes, that as well. Another board member resigned at the same time. Just the dynamics of the business have changed. Steve's really busy.
Yeah.
So he's still an investor, so he's still invested.
Yeah, which is great. In general, he's had a bit of flack, especially recently, around misinformation with some of the guests that he's had on, especially the high-profile guests who come from academia. But what are your thoughts on sort of that flack that he's got?
So you'd have to ask Steve how he feels about that and what his opinion is. But he's had some really good guests. I just mentioned Professor Sarah Berry, right? She's really good.
Right.
He's had people like Lane Norton on, Peter Attia, Giles Yeo. These are all really well respected.
Yeah.
He's also had some highly questionable people on there that are giving some very dangerous advice.
Yeah.
Amongst some really good advice they've given.
Yeah. It's funny that, isn't it? When you see some stuff seems very credible and it's like, oh yeah, I agree with that. But then there'll be some wild remarks made that you just think, well, that doesn't sound right. Or,
it doesn't sound right. And
or are they doing it because they want that controversy or that view?
Perhaps they genuinely believe it.
Yeah.
But I don't think they've dug into the science enough. So Steve has some really good guests. He's got his way of running the podcast.
Yeah.
It's not really for me to comment, but I'm quite comfortable with saying there's a couple of guests on there that have been very questionable. Like I was on the High Performance podcast recently, and Jake and Damien, the interviewers there, they asked, this came up, not in relation to Steve, but in Misinformation.
Yes.
They sort of urged me to call out who they'd had on there. It's named Gary Brecker on the episode.
Oh yeah, you did, yes. I saw that.
I was just going to say more general, but and why. And I had watched the episode, and I could give one example on that why I found him questionable, but it's more his other content elsewhere that I find questionable. Does Gary give a load of brilliant advice as well? Of course he does. And he might come from a place where he wants to help people. I don't know, but there's enough highly questionable stuff that I don't deem him to be a trustworthy source of information. Now, me saying that's going to get me a lot of hate. You should have seen some of the comments when yeah, they do the clips, don't they? When the high performance guys put one of the clips and I mentioned the Gary Brecker in there, right? Of course, Gary Brecker's got a million viewers. I've got 15,000. Of course, they're going to listen to him. And this is have you heard of Brandolini's law?
No.
Let me explain what that is.
I think I mentioned it on the show. Yeah. On that show, briefly.
Let me explain it by the definition and give you an example, because I think it's really important for people to get here, and I'll bring it back to what I'm talking about. Yeah. It goes something like this. The amount of energy required to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude greater than it was to create the original bullshit claim. Okay? Right. So I made this one up for purpose of this sort of conversation. Yeah. Instant coffee granules. When you have instant coffee made from that, you're consuming the whole thing, and that is going to cause inflammation, and it's toxic. Okay? But if you have percolated coffee from coffee beans, that's okay, because you're not consuming the whole bean. I made that up. Let me just understand that, folks. That is not true. I made it up to demonstrate Brandolini's law, because it took me, I literally came up with that one once in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay? Now, if I was this ultra-crepidarian, I could film that, put it on a social post. Right? Took me that long, 10 minutes tops. Right? Done. It's out there in the world with my millions of viewers. For someone else to come along and dispute that, they've got to go through the science, the mechanistic data, and anything, and just refute it. It would take at best several hours. They might have a low number of viewers. It's out there. The damage is done. And this is where the seed oil thing could have come from. It's Brandolini's law magnified many, many times. Yeah, got it. And this is what it is about the likes of Gary Brecker. And the reason I'm mentioning him, he was one of many, is because he's called out by so many other credible influencers.
What was the thing he said that?
He was talking about protein breakdown. Right. He was talking about the microbiome and why the microbiome is great. And he said so much good stuff. And he was talking about the way that without a healthy microbiome, you won't digest protein. It's worse that effect. That's not what happens. You've got enzymes for protein. Yes, you need a healthy microbiome for numerous other reasons, but it's not about protein digestion. And this is basic stuff. And it sounds very credible when he's saying it. But this is why you've got to be on point. I mean, the chances are I've probably said a couple of slip-ups during this episode where I might be wrong. And people should hold me to account for that. They should pick me up. But if I keep saying the same thing wrong again and again, especially big things, if I have said anything, it's been a misspeak and probably nothing major. But when I'm making big claims like that, I mean, don't get me wrong, you have a nice conversation like that, you can get carried away a bit.
You can, yeah.
You can do. And there are some people that are probably in that bubble where most of the time they're saying really good advice. And I wouldn't put them in the same camp as the Eddie Aboos and the Tonic Health of the world, right? But sometimes it's just the odd questionable thing. And it's slightly disappointing. But then if they pick themselves up on that. So maybe an example of that is Andrew Huberman. You know, who's a very good podcaster, one of the biggest podcasts in the world. I don't know his area. He's a neuroscientist, especially ophthalmology, I think it is, with eyes. But he has a lot of really good guests. He's one of the top 10 podcasts in the world, right? He's huge. But he has a lot of top scientists on. Right. But there's a few things he said that is in my wheelhouse. And I know, I'm not sure about that, Andrew. Right. Okay, you know, if anyone wants to ask me an example now, I can't give one, of course. Sure. But it just makes me think he's still what I call a high-rung thinker, but there's the odd time that I think, you know, where I never get that from Lane Norton. Do you know who Lane Norton is? A powerlifter, another doctor of nutrition. If there is anything I hear from him, he's always course-corrected, or he said it in a nuanced way, or it was a slip-up or something. Right, okay. So he would be, he is someone that people should follow, I think. He's very, very credible. Peter Attia is another one. You with the Outlive the book. And, right. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
No, it is really good. Yeah, he's really good as well.
Right, okay, awesome. Yeah. So what's your future plans now, I guess? And are you working on these sort of trends, ideas? You spoke a little about the innovation side, but I guess from you personally at Huel and your communication effort that you're doing.
So the Huel one's easier to explain. I'm part-time at Huel now. Got a brilliant team. I run the sustainable nutrition team. Everyone's doing a great job, and the broader team as well. So, but it's been actually quite a full-on couple of weeks. I've had quite a lot going on. I'm doing what's needed and a bit more, but I'm also then doing this other stuff, which I'm flying the Huel flag hopefully when I'm out and about as well. We've got a couple of new products coming soon. Okay. I'm not telling anyone else.
Any hint of what sort of thing or nothing?
No, I can't.
Okay, fine.
Firstly, there'll be some new flavours like the Black Edition, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the flavours are going to be, but we need more. We need to increase. We've got 4 flavours. We need to increase that range. Sure. Right? Yeah. So they'll be coming. I can share that much. Yeah. The other things, no, I'm not going to say. Okay. But what am I going to do? I keep getting asked this. I don't know. I was so focused on getting the book out there and doing this. I've got busy calendar till kind of the end of March with interviews.
Right.
And then April's looking pretty good, as in haven't got many meetings. Good. I've got
time to reflect.
Time to reflect and write. Yeah. So if this book keeps going well and people keep buying it, then HarperCollins might give me another deal. I'm kind of tinkering around, playing with another one, looking at the misinformation side of things.
Right, interesting, yeah.
Right. Yeah, but a lot broader. A word that I create in that, a made up James word, is dietology. Portmanteau of diet and ideology.
Right, okay.
And I would like to call the book that.
Yeah.
Because I've got so much more to say, not just about the problem misinformation, but I want to expand on that, or what to do about it, which we've already spoken about.
Yeah.
That would be part of it. But why? I spoke about the word culture, and why are people so invested emotionally in the food, not just what the food they eat, but the food that someone else eats?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, where does that come from? I want to look at that a lot more. And I know where I want to go with that, but also another part of it would be to look at nutrition, the scientific method when it comes to nutrition, and how hyped it is and where it goes wrong. I want to give academia a hard time as well as bigging it up.
Right.
In that, where you look at the different structure of design of trials. I don't want to go into too deep because people will get lost. But like people hear about things like Mendelian randomization. What is that and why is it relevant to nutrition? It's looking at gene patterns and how it links, and along with other types of research, it can add to the validity. But people are getting carried away with that at the moment. What about Bayesian reasoning, where you look at evidence and refine? Well, that's really interesting. And that's the way I try and view things in life more generally. So I want to talk about all these things. So possibly that. But what I do, I keep a Substack, Thought for Food. If anyone wants to check it out and subscribe, please do.
Yeah, we'll put the link.
Yeah, that's where I put my essays. Now, I'm not a big Substack user. You get 1 or 2 a month, but they're usually quite long.
Right.
And the person I write the Substack for the most is me.
Yeah.
Because
just to get your thoughts down.
I get my thoughts down. It's all very well writing them, but you have to commit to publishing. Because that makes you be intellectually on point. It helps improve my writing skills. I try to make them try to make my Substack articles very readable. A short one would be 1,200 words. A long one might be 4,000 words, which is, a half-hour read or whatever. I'm sorting my ideas out. So the next few Substacks you'll see will probably be ideas that would go into this future book. So I'm writing a big piece at the moment, probably be a 2 or 3 article piece on what I'm calling nutrition populism. Yeah. As in looking at the political theory of populism that's going on across the world at the moment, how it manifests into nutrition. And I haven't come up with the idea, but I am running with the idea and furthering it. And I've got a lot to say here, and it's going to be at least April before the part 1 comes out, because I've got so much to do, and I'm not getting a lot of time to write at the moment because I'm doing busy, all things like this. Yeah. So I've got a lot to say on that. But that will mean that when I come and have conversations with people like you, I'm a bit more aware of what's going on in the world with nutrition. I'm more informed.
Right, okay.
So I'm doing that. Yes, I've got stuff I want to share, but I'm also doing it for me so I can share my ideas of form. Because although I'm thinking about this nutrition populism thing, it's still a mess. Yeah. I've got about 4,000 or 5,000 words on paper, but they're a mess.
Okay.
And I've got to now make
so that will clear that up for you.
Yeah, clear that up. So, and I've got a few other stuff to read as well. So that's that. But in the shorter term, what am I doing? I don't really know. But I'm toying with the idea of doing a YouTube properly. So at the moment, I put my real Instagram reels on YouTube as an afterthought. Yeah. Toying on doing the sort of 5 or 6 minute ones. Yeah. Because if I want to talk about a research paper, you've got at most 90 seconds on Instagram. You can't do anything justice.
No, it's tough.
But with 5 or 6 minutes unlimited, you can do a better job. It's not just research papers, but I might want to explore certain things. So April, May, I may start that. I've got all the cameras and all the stuff now. I'm ready.
Great.
I haven't got the brain capacity at the moment.
Yeah.
So you've got to do a couple a week.
Yeah.
I think.
Right.
So, recording twice a month maybe with my friend. So
great.
I've got to think about that. So that's probably the only project that's in my head in the short term.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm just going to try and just keep going to the gym and chilling out a bit. Maybe having a couple of holidays this year. And,
why not?
Yeah. And otherwise, just don't know, keep doing the podcast thing if people want to talk to me.
Brilliant. Was there finally anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on, or what is the one message that you hope people take away from your work?
Okay, that's a really easy one. That's come up before and I know exactly what it is.
Okay.
If people come away with one thing, I want them merely to do this. Acknowledge the fact that the food system is complex and we should stop thinking in black and white when it comes to food. If you can just acknowledge that one thing, you've already got half the battle. Mm-hmm. And I spoke about misinformation. If people are now asking, why should we listen to this baldy 50-odd-year-old bloke? Not you. Why should people listen to me, right? Yeah. I realise I described us both.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And if they're asking that question already, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
Because they should be questioning everything I say just as much as anyone else.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
Great.
So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks for having me.
Great discussion, and wish you all the best in the next few months, and then hope to see more books coming out as well.
Well, we'll see about that. Yeah, hopefully we'll sell this one first.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, sir.
Take care.
Cheers.